This was a direct racial attack. They got let loose on a corner that was essentially a mob. It was the wrong place. The city of Cincinnati have a place that dangerous that a group of 6 white people can't even walk without being beaten?
All right, folks, picture this. You're out celebrating your birthday in downtown Cincinnati. You get blindsided, you get struck over 30 times, get a concussion, and then to top it all off, the city charges you with a crime. It's not a true life drama podcast on Netflix or somewhere else. It's real life. And the attorney representing those clients is right here sitting with us today. Doug Brannon is a relentless criminal defense and civil rights attorney right here in Dayton, Ohio, and we are going to talk about it all. Doug, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Man, you've been around a little bit, right? You look young on camera, but you're, you've been around, man. You're up there with me in age.
Right about there. Been practicing law 22 years now, so I'm not fresh out of law school anymore for sure.
Not a fresh puppy, but let's dig right into it, man. You are very intimately involved in the Cincinnati case, and you're representing the victims in the case. But I've heard you say on Fox News and some other places that your victim or your client is now a victim for the second time. That phrase cuts hard, man. What do you mean by that?
And as bad as the beating was that this group of people took down in Cincinnati at the hands of these gang members, these thugs, these felons, they've gone ahead under pressure from the community. These civic so-called leaders down in Cincinnati have put pressure on the police department to bring a bullshit criminal charge against my client, Alex. And it was a disorderly conduct, fourth-degree misdemeanor, and the politician should never be involved in bringing a criminal charge against somebody.
All right, so let's set the scene. 4th and Elm, downtown Cincinnati, Ohio. It's during the Jazz Festival. The brawl breaks out. Some small clips go viral on the news. Fox News gets involved. Politicians are involved. Police is involved. And your client is now Alex, one of those victims that was beaten in this brawl. Paint the full picture for us, because a lot of people on the internet only saw a few seconds of a video. And obviously, look, videos can be made into whatever people want them to see, and we never get the full picture. So paint that for us if you would.
And that's the tough part about this, because the real security footage off the buildings is still in the hands of law enforcement, and it has not been released to the public yet. I've had an opportunity to view that video. So this really starts all the way back in the club, where my clients were just there in the VIP section, having a good time. Nothing happened in the club. There was nothing to start the thing other than when they walked outside and some racial comments were said to my client. And in response to that, my clients didn't respond. They didn't say anything back. These thugs started surrounding him, started with some pushing, some shoving. And Alex, who ended up getting criminally charged, before that little slap that the black community wants to talk about, this thug ran up behind him and hit him in the back of the head twice. Not once, but twice. So what did he do? Instead of throwing a punch back at him, he looked to defuse the situation because these people were surrounding him. He went up to him, said, "You stop hitting me." He's got some Russian heritage in him and has a little bit of an accent. And at the same time, this guy's gang buddy circles around back of Alex and hits him again in the back of the head. And that's what's not being shown on TV. These little snippets of clips that people have taken and edited paint the wrong picture about what took place. When the full video gets released and everybody sees what actually occurred, they're going to see not one of my clients throw a single punch. They were too afraid. They were surrounded. They were being beaten, kicked, punched, hit, anything that you can think of, brutally, knocked out multiple times, picked back up, beaten again. They were lucky to get out of there with as few of injuries as they got. And they were all severely injured. A lot of them concussions. They're suffering from PTSD. They're afraid to go out in public now. They don't know where it's safe anymore for themselves. It's terrible.
So in your opinion, based on the facts that you know as of right now today, your clients, the people that they're with, did nothing to provoke this attack that seemed like they were blindsided, they were hit out of the blue, nothing to provoke this attack at all.
No, this was a direct racial attack. They were just out in Cincinnati for a good time, thought, hey, let's go in here, try it. They were down near the Jazz Festival, and they were in the club without any real incident, but the second they stepped foot out of that club, they got let loose on a corner that was essentially a mob. And there was no police protection down there at the time. There should have been a police presence anyways, given the Jazz Festival going on. There wasn't. And they were just brutally attacked and beaten for no reason whatsoever. They did not provoke this attack. And that I can't get through everybody's head. But once they see the full extent and the full video that comes out, it's going to be clear for them.
So, I mean, really, it sounds like wrong place, wrong time. clients not knowing the area, and just picking the wrong location, man, which could happen to any of us. Any of us when we're out of town on vacation or anywhere else, like we go into spots and maybe it seems okay. But then you get back home, it's a couple months later, and you're like, oh man, that I shouldn't have been in that spot, right?
And that's exactly what happened to them. They are predominantly Dayton people, went down for his birthday party, and they were just out sort of picking a spot and randomly picked a spot. They're thinking, well, this seems close to the jazz festival. I'm sure it's just fine. And they walked in and it was the wrong place. But should the city of Cincinnati have a place that dangerous that a group of 6 white people can't even walk without being beaten? I mean, should that be the case?
I mean, you wouldn't think so, right?
I would think in my community, I would want anybody of any race or nationality to feel safe in walking around town, going in whatever public establishment that there is without a risk of them being beaten to death.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's just not the case in a lot of our, not just inner city environments, but even, rural communities, right? I mean, man, I've been around long. I grew up in the inner city. I've been in the suburbs. I've experienced it both. And I think if I was, as a white guy in my younger age, there were parts of the city I wouldn't go into a bar in. And I know that you go to the country or you go somewhere else, there's parts of neighborhoods that, that a black person wouldn't go into because they knew that that's just not the right vibe. But when you're in a city with a festival and you're in this just public environment where everybody's walking the streets and, having a good time, you might not know where you're at, especially when you get down on the levee and you get down around Newport and Covington and Cincinnati and all that kind of merged together. You can go from a really great little area, maybe around the Red Stadium or Bengals Stadium, and you can walk, 500 feet, and next thing you know, you're on a hot corner, man.
And that's the difference between a couple of blocks. But how do you know that?
Right.
Are these things really made public? And is that the way we really want our cities? And when something like this does happen, do we look to hold the people accountable that are the wrongdoers? Or do we look to flip the script to try and make a narrative that suits our purposes? And that's what's really bothersome about this case is that the politicians have jumped on this, and some of the so-called community leaders in Cincinnati, they are seeking a criminal charge based on somebody's race, not on the evidence, not on what these tapes show, but they want them held accountable because they want to blame them that something, you know, if I was in a community and some white people did something wrong, I'd want them held accountable. I don't want them representing me and my community of people. If you have some wrongdoers in your community, root them out. I mean, I know you work hard to root bad people out of your apartment complexes.
For sure. So, top it all off, and you say the public hasn't seen the entire story. And part of that's because the city has put on a big fight to seal a lot of the evidence, right? And they're kind of claiming Marcy's Law, whatever, which my understanding is Marcy Law is, to protect victims, not necessarily defendants. So talk to me about the irony of what the city's trying to do.
It is hard to understand why the city is seeking to use Marcy's Law to conceal what they're doing with this criminal charge against my client. Typically, like you said, Marcy's Law is designed to protect victims, their identities, some personal information from getting out there. Well, in this particular case, my client's been charged as a defendant with a crime, and they're trying to use Marcy's Law and say, well, we can't put any of this information out there because we need to protect him because he's also a victim. Well, we've opposed that motion. There can be a lot less restrictive means to protect somebody's information. Redact their social security numbers, redact their telephone numbers, redact their address. But any court proceeding, and especially this one, needs to be open to the public so that they can see what's really going on in the case, especially in light of all the misinformation regarding the videos that are out there.
Have you guys had a case on that or a hearing on the motion to get the evidence out there yet?
The hearing happens next week down in the Cincinnati Municipal Court.
Okay.
So we've opposed it by brief, and we're going to have that fight in front of the judge next week.
Yeah, well, I hope that goes well for you because I think when we look at communities and when there's viral moments that just get out there and they take off, whatever the incident might be, I don't know that it always necessarily helps when, like, for example, a police agency, they come right out the day after and release the entire body cam or the entire footage. Sometimes that causes a little bit more harm than the other because, for whatever reason, emotions are still high. But in a case like this, you would want to see that full video right off the bat instead of just painting a small little picture, right? But so what do you think the city's afraid of?
I think the city's afraid of some of the truth coming out. I think that the detectives investigating the felony crimes had good reason to withhold the tape during the course of their investigation. There were a lot of people that need to be identified during that time. They didn't, this security video, when it shows up, doesn't show up with somebody's name, phone number, social security number to where they can track these down through video, facial recognition and other means. They've been able to identify multiple people. They're still trying to identify a couple at this point, but the security footage in this, it's some of the best I've ever seen. Very clear, can be zoomed in on, and it's they've been doing a great job in identifying who these thugs and felons are that did the beating. The saddest part about this as well is the number of people that sat around with their cell phone cameras. I mean, there were 10, 15 people probably. I haven't had a chance to count them yet, sitting around with their cell phone cameras, recording these beatings, encouraging it, and doing nothing to stop it or to help these people that were desperate for help. That's what's sad.
Well, I think we see it every day. And that is one of the most amazing things to me when I see a clip on whether it be Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or Facebook. You're looking at a situation and somebody's in trouble or they're getting hurt or something bad is happening to a person. And you have a person sitting there taping the entire instant instead of just jumping in and helping. And for me, I think like, where the hell did our country go so far wrong that you're going to sit there and watch somebody go through one of the most traumatic times in their life and worry about how many views you're going to get on TikTok? I don't know.
And is the TikTok really worth it? Is that video worth it at that point? Somebody needs to step up. When you see something, say something. Even if you don't want to physically intervene in a situation like that, is it worth saying something, yelling something out, calling the police? These people did none of that.
Right.
That's the really sad part about this.
Now, the police union, the Cincinnati Police Union, they've came out and, from what I've seen, outright just said that there is political interference in this case.
And I wouldn't dispute any of that. The evidence that I've seen so far of this, and from what I've been able to gather from talking with people involved in the case, there was some direct interference.
Yes, when I listened to an interview not so long ago, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was part of the police union. But one of the things that he came out with is really just that they were in disagreement with the prosecutors in some parts of this case. They were in disagreement with how things were handled. How do you think a city can strike a balance? I mean, because that's a big deal, man. When your police are saying, hey, there's political interference, we don't agree with what the prosecutors are doing, we don't agree with these parts of the case, and they're the guys and gals that are investigating these cases and presenting them for criminal charges, when they are not trusted fully by the prosecutors or the politicians that jump in, and they end up taking a case a different way than maybe the police department put it forward. Like, what kind of long-term damage do you think that does to a city?
Well, it breeds distrust within the city, and where you have politicians insisting upon criminal charges, interfering with the judiciary. I mean, there's a huge constitutional conflict with the rights and responsibilities, who's supposed to do when. That political interference should never happen. The judiciary should always run separately. Those prosecutors or elected officials, they are tasked with the responsibility to decide who should be prosecuted, who shouldn't, using their best judgment based on the evidence. The problem with this case is that it wasn't necessarily based on the evidence. It was based on what somebody wanted to have happen for visibility. I mean,
Sure.
that's the optics of it were more important than the actual facts, and that's the really troublesome part.
Well, as I watch it and I watch news stories and read articles online, I mean, from the very start, you could just see the city of Cincinnati trying to backpedal so quickly to try to squash a story. And I felt like they didn't even realize how big the story was right off the bat, right? Like, it felt like they were so out of touch with understanding that this is an absolute viral moment in history on virtually every platform. And the way that they backpedaled to me was so surprising. Like, why not come out and just attack it head on with the truth and figure it out? And I think it's because, what you mentioned earlier, right? Cincinnati has a lot of investments that have come in. I mean, of course, you have the Bengals, you have the Reds, you have the entire Levy district that's down there. You mesh with Newport. They're still trying to build up their downtown business district. They're throwing festivals at Fountain Square, which, by the way, every single festival that happens in downtown Cincinnati has some type of crazy incident going on. Like, it's just the truth. Every time they have something, it doesn't matter what it is, there's always something happening in downtown. And I see that's probably what the city's afraid of. Like, they don't want that image to be out there. But This case is going to continue to be viral. I wish you the best of luck with it, and your clients the best of luck with it. Um, but at the end of the day, this isn't your first rodeo. This isn't the first crazy case that you've dealt with, and you've had some wild ones before, man. Like, what's the case that stands out to you the most in your career?
You know, I've had toxic torts, a lot of public entity cases against municipalities, things like that. You know, the Cincinnati case, it's very important for several reasons, but, you know, in the past, I've done, for example, a series of cases against the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office and some of the conduct that was going on in their jail. You know, it was probably 7, 8 cases in total. I can think of several that are probably worth discussing that received a lot of attention. You know, one is the Joseph Guglielmo matter. This was a homeless vet that was in the jail, beating on the door, seeking some medical attention. The sergeant at the time on duty, in order to silence him because it was at night, went in there, stepped up on him, and found out that he was a vet, sort of punked him out for being a Navy guy, and eventually it was essentially, oh, look, you stepped on my toe, and tuned him up. Well, when he tuned him up, he caused a bleed on his brain. So you see him go into this cell, and then minutes later, when Joseph Guglielmo can't stand up and he's down on the floor, they drag him out of there. And by the time they get him to the hospital to do a craniectomy, the damage has already been done at that point. And that was probably one of the ugliest beatings by a jail staff I've ever seen. It was just brutal.
And was that all on camera?
Yeah, what happened in the cell itself was not on camera. There were some deposition testimony that came out during that gave light into exactly what happened after we filed the case and litigated the case. But that ultimately resulted in a $5.6 million settlement with the county for that particular matter. So
yeah, one of the other ones I think that I remember reading about was Amber Swink, right? She was another prisoner in the jail. One of your clients that you represented, she was restrained and ultimately pepper sprayed. And I think one of the things that stood out to me when I read about that case was, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the attorney with it, but there was actually a cover-up attempt by the county to get rid of or erase or do something with evidence, including some of the video surveillance, right?
Well, that's an interesting case. And Amber Swing, nice girl. This is a good example of somebody that just had a bad night. She came into the jail intoxicated, was being loud. They put her in the restraint chair. Again, a different sergeant on duty this time decided she'd heard enough screaming and yelling, goes into her cell with her in the restraint chair, empties a full can of mace directly into her face. And keep in mind, the restraint chair, it's a 4-point restraint. The wrists are secured, the legs are secured, and it's just the person sitting in the chair. They can't go anywhere. They can't even raise up their hands to defend themselves. And by emptying this can of mace directly in her face, she did it until she passed out from the fumes and the inhalation and the stress from it. So, we filed suit on that case ultimately, but during the public records request phase, the sheriff's department had a real hard time coming up with the video. In fact, they claimed it didn't exist. And in fact, the jail has never been able to explain what happened to the video. However, there is a lot of that video out there. If somebody Googles it, searches it up, they will all notice it will have the Brannon Law Firm logo embossed on it, because I have the only copy of that original video that exists. Funny how that disappeared.
So hold on, let's stop. The county couldn't find the video.
County lost it, apparently, Todd.
And they've never been able to find it and give it to you.
No, nor could they find the use of force reports. And keep in mind, these things occur in triplicate. When a use of force happens in a jail, one goes out to the training facility, one goes in the officer's file, the other goes in the jail file. And, the video, the use of force reports, all of that mysteriously vanished in this particular case.
All right. So are you able to tell us how you got that video?
I can't. And I will go to the grave with that one.
You don't want to break the news right now on the Maxed Out podcast?
And I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question. Todd, as much as I'd love to give it to you, you're going to have to wait for me to die.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. But you end up getting it. So, okay. So I can imagine how you got it because, remember, I was in law enforcement, right? And we have whistleblowers all the time with different stuff. And, you had to get it from something. But okay, I won't ask you anymore.
I will say somebody stepped up and did the right thing in this circumstance.
And there usually is somebody that does that. And in a lot of these cases, usually somebody wants the right thing to happen.
And that's how this comes to light. But seeing what happened to this individual person, they knew it was wrong. Something needed to be done about it so that this didn't continue to happen in the jail.
Yeah. So Sasha Garvin, that was another one of your clients from Montgomery County Jail, right?
It was. That was a medical malpractice case that occurred in the context of the jail. And this was all occurring during the same time in the jail. She developed a bowel obstruction in the jail, and she kept asking for medical treatment, asking for medical treatment. They brought her down into an observation cell and essentially forgot to check on her. And, they're supposed to do 30-minute checks in the jail, never check. Next morning shows up, they do a count. She's lying dead on the floor.
Mm, 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 mm.
And it is a sad state of affairs where somebody desperately seeking medical attention in the jail can't be seen by anybody. The doctor that's supposed to be looking over everybody in the jail won't come in. She took a phone call, said give her an aspirin, something to that effect. And what she really needed is to be taken to the ER and be fully evaluated. With that, they would have discovered the bowel obstruction and been able to do a simple surgery to remove the bowel obstruction.
Yeah, the jails, man, I've never known local jails to have some elaborate medical staff that is on duty, but there's always simple procedures to follow to avoid these types of situations, right? Like there's so many national cases out there where somebody high profile goes to prison. We can name them, but I won't. And next thing you know, they're hanging in their cell. They've been there for, half a day. And you're like, where are the checks? Or the video cameras just suddenly broke, right? Like you can figure out what case that is recently.
Well, that seems to be pretty popular right now. And that's it. They have staff, but sometimes it's limited staff, nurses, people that aren't qualified to make a diagnosis. Well, in that case, you have to take these people to a hospital, have them truly evaluated. This is America. We just can't let them die in jail.
Yeah. All right. So I know we're beating up on the county and we were beating up on law enforcement a little bit, but I want to make sure that we're clear because when I met you years ago, and I mean, heck, it was 15, 16 years ago, maybe when I first met you. I was a police officer at the time. You hang out with, police officers. You like police. You don't have anything against police officers.
It's like anything else, Todd. It's any other profession, any other industry. If you could get rid of 10%, the bottom 10%, the people that aren't doing the job correctly, that would solve a lot of problems. I'm friends with a lot of police officers. I represent a lot of police officers in personal injury cases, things like that. And they're good friends of mine. I hang out with them in my free time even. And they're good people. They're doing a hard job. It's not lost upon me how difficult their job can be at times, but at the same time, you have to do your job correctly. And if you follow your policies, your procedures, you treat people fairly and with respect, that's how you get good outcomes.
Let's talk about one more law enforcement case that's out there, only because it's close to home for me because I worked there. My one of my first police departments was Springboro Police Department, but you had a civil case, Campbell versus Springboro, right? And that was over a canine incident.
Over two canine incidents.
Yeah.
There was a client by the name of Gimperline in Campbell. The Gimperline is probably the more interesting of the two, but what this was, it was an underage kids drinking party, and the Springboro Police Department shows up with this particular officer and his dog Spike.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they drag all these kids out of the house, line them up in front of the house and giving them the what's over. And the Gimperline girl, little high school girl, tiny, weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, gets a little mouthy, so they place her in handcuffs, throw her in the back of the cruiser. She wiggles out of the handcuffs, hits the window button on the cruiser window, and it goes down. So she decides she's going to sneak out the side of the cruiser and take off down the street where she ran and hid in the back of a little kid's playhouse in somebody's fenced-in backyard. Well, the kids that were all lined up were getting tuned up by the cops up there. And all of a sudden, after Gimperline had made her little escape, one of these kids lets the cops in on, "Hey, you stupid idiots. She just got out and she's gone." Well, that's when you hear some of the officers get pretty upset. The canine handler in particular, and these are just one of these quotes that you'll never forget. "She's going to get a nice rude awakening here in a minute or two. It's not going to feel very good." And he goes, gets his canine, puts it on her track, tracks her into the backyard where he finds her where she's hiding in this little kid's plastic playhouse in the backyard, sees her, and lets the dog loose on her. Rips open her leg. She ends up in the hyperbaric chamber in the hospital, severe injuries. And you can guess what I did with that. So, that's that story. And that officer, thank goodness, as a result of these two cases, was not fired. Terrible dog handler. He had what was supposed to be a public relations dog that was trained in to bark and hold a suspect or maybe do some drug searches in
Hmm.
a high school. He made the independent decision. I want a Billy Badass dog. I'm going to make this a bite and hold dog, teach him to bite instead of bark at somebody, and had no control over this animal. Just didn't have the training, didn't keep up with the training with the animal. It was a disaster. So we eliminated that disaster, and Springboro is a safer place for it now.
I can't say that I disagree with you, man. I worked in Springboro, for a while. I worked with that canine officer. I was there the day that Spike came on duty, right? Like I remember them getting the donations for car and food, and I remember, Nick, the canine handler, going up for training and bringing Spike back, and we were excited, man. Like having a canine, like we did. Despite it being a small town, we did a ton of drug interdiction, or at least I did,
Yep.
because we're right there by 75. We had some main routes that went through. Like it was actually, if you were a proactive police officer, you could go out and just bang felony drug arrests, felony warrants arrests like nonstop. I actually enjoyed working there for that environment. Now it was a rich community, so half the time you're pulling over. Like one of my cases there, I pulled over a truck, DUI, older dude, 70 some years old, with his wife. Pulled him over at the gas station. And the crazy thing with the interaction, and I'm just setting this up for what type of town it is. I'm sitting there doing my OVI test, right? And I was a huge OVI officer. I mean, a couple hundred a year. I got a MAD award, right? The guy's hammered, all right? And in this conversation, he shares with me that he just left a Purple Heart dinner with our mayor. And kind of at the same moment, I'm looking over the corner of the gas station, and sure enough, there's a mayor standing there watching this whole case. Now, I arrest a guy for an OVI. We take him back. We do all that stuff. But I also search his truck before we towed it. Instant to arrest if I'm talking to the attorney.
Of course, it's to the rest.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm for officer safety as well. Let's not forget that. Yeah.
It always is, right? The furtive movements, right? At the end of the day, when I searched this truck, I found, I mean, it had to be like a half pound of flour out of this guy's truck. And I find out he's best friends with the mayor. And in fact, he did just leave a Purple Heart dinner with our mayor, who our mayor was a great guy. But I will tell you, I never saw that case come to a conclusion. I don't know what happened with it. I don't know where it went. I don't know what happened in the court. I know that I had seen that gentleman afterwards and ran his record, and nothing was ever on there. But that was the type of town, right? That we had lots of attorneys, we had lots of doctors, right? So you go from taking domestic violences were huge down there. A lot of people living above their means. You would go into this $1 million mansion, and they would have literally no furniture, nothing, not a TV. Like they could afford the house.
I've seen it. And
They,
then they have few too many to drink that night. Husband and wife get into it, boyfriend, girlfriend get into it, and Springboro's finest get called out to help with the situation. And there you go.
nice. So back to Spike. I was there when he got in, and the one thing that I distinctly remember about Spike is he was mean as shit. He was he was so out of control that he couldn't even come into the roll call room without a muzzle on. Right now, that's not normal at a lot of police departments. I mean, they go by command, right?
And there are just aggressive dogs out there that either because they start out that way, they get trained up that way, or the handler just isn't a very good handler and they can't control the animal. Well, the solution isn't keep that dog in the department. It's time to get rid of that dog. And if you're that committed to having a canine, start over with a new dog, one that fits the community, not one that bites everybody. And I think you even got bitten by that dog, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, there was definitely a bite. I mean, we were on a felony traffic stop. I kicked up. I don't even remember what it was. It was a felony warrant, felony dope, or something. I mean, there was two or three of us there mid afternoon. We car doesn't necessarily run from us, but it won't stop from us. So after about a half mile, pulls into a little apartment complex. We got him at gunpoint, felony gunpoint, and I didn't understand this about canines at the point, right? I wasn't knowledgeable, but as the guy gets out of the car, he decides he's going to take off running. Well, of course, we're there at gunpoint. Police officer's natural instinct is we're going to take off. We're going to chase the guy, right? Because we're at that point, like the whole crew I was working with, like we were young, we were in shape, we like to run, we like to
Yep.
fight, we like to chase. But our new canine was there as well. And what I didn't know about canines is they don't know the difference between a police officer and a bad guy in the moment. They know their handler. But if they see somebody running and he lets him go, he goes the first guy that's running because that's what he's trained to do. So of course, we're the first guy, and he jumps up and gets it. I mean, I didn't get harmed, but
That just means you were the
yeah.
slowest guy, Todd. That's why you got bit.
Well, I know I was the fastest guy.
Yeah.
He went, whatever. Everybody else was slow. But that wasn't the first time. One of the other guys that I worked with, who's actually on the same thing, he had a similar situation where he got knocked down by Spike in that situation and was going to go on him and bite him. But more than that, I saw the damage that Spike could cause firsthand. Now, I'm not going to lie. At the time, it was like screw criminals, whatever. We're police officers. We have a badge. Like, let's get the bad guy, right? So you don't think about that time. But now that I'm, decades removed, I go back and I think about it, and I remember, a drunk that I pulled over one night that decided he was going to take off running from me in the woods, and Spike tracked him, and I was on the track with him. Which, by the way, anytime we tracked a suspect, I was deathly afraid. Like, and I'm not exaggerating. Like, I was afraid at nighttime to be on a track with this dog if I was with the canine handler, because when they're gone and they're figurating and they're whatever. Like, a lot of times they'll have a tendency to circle back around, and I was every time that he would turn his shoulder and start, I'm like, oh fuck, man, he doesn't know that I'm a cop. Like, this, he's gonna tear me up, because he was out of control and you couldn't trust him. But I remember we found the guy, and he ended up bites the guy, which there was felony charges on the guy. He wouldn't come out. Blah blah blah. Like, it was right to send the dog in. It was right to do all that. He had the proper announcements. He had all the warnings. Like, hey, dude, you're gonna get bit. Like, come on out.
Yep.
And when Spike goes in and drags this guy out by his arm, and when he came out, man, his tricep was hanging from his arm. I mean, like, his whole muscle. Like, I had never
Yeah.
seen anything like that.
When those dogs tear into somebody, they can do a lot of damage. I mean, and like you say, these are big canines on these animals. Some of them even have some dental work done to have metal teeth, cap, things like that. I mean, they can tear in, rip muscles. And when you see significant damage like that, ask, did we just apprehend somebody that was just having a bad night, that maybe had too much to drink and made a bad decision? Or is this a really bad guy that we're tuning up? And you don't always know that as a police officer out there.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole goal is, yes, you have to take these people into custody, but you can't do more harm than good at the same time.
Well, that's the thing, right? You can't just allow your dog to sit there and maul on somebody. And when you give the command for your dog to release and get off, it should listen, right? And there just recently there was a video here in Dayton, and I have so many friends that are still police officers, and I love them to death. It was part of my DNA. But here recently, I don't know if you saw that video with Dayton with the canine that wouldn't listen to his handler and actually bit him. Did you see that video?
It's not an isolated incident. These dogs don't always respond to command. They don't always, like you said, bite the person that they're supposed to bite. They are still an animal, somewhat unpredictable. Yes, they can respond to commands, but they don't always instantly respond to commands. And they get caught up in the moment as much as anybody else does. And where they're latched and loaded on somebody, getting them off isn't always easy. I mean, they even have to use sticks to break the jaws, things like that, to get them off people. It's not always pretty what these dogs do.
All right. So last thing on dogs, because you're an attorney, you're sitting here with us. You do criminal defense. First of all, I think canines are a great tool, and I think they should be part of the police department's tool belt as long as they're properly trained and all that good stuff. But I was huge on dope. Like, I love drug interdiction. That was just a big part of what I want to do. If I could get some drugs and guns off the street, like, I felt like I had a good shift. So I use the canine a lot, right? Because people like you tell everybody not to let us search their cars. And, they have their constitutional rights. And unfortunately, we have to listen to that, even though we know there's drugs in the car. But when you have a canine, it was easy, right? As long as you're within a reasonable time frame, which I think the courts have held, within like 20 minutes of our normal duty to issue a citation and go through all that. If you could get the canine there to do an open air sniff, you were covered under law. So when you see a case where your client gets jammed up with drugs, and the only probable cause that is in that affidavit is an open air sniff, are you like, oh man, they got my client? Dogs know drugs, man. Has to be a sure shot case.
These dogs aren't always accurate. The command that, or what happens, which most people don't understand, is that when a canine scents drugs, they're trained to sit. And, you can give a sit command. The handler can prompt the dog to sit. That dog doesn't always hit on drugs. I've seen plenty of searches where these dogs supposedly hit. The officers think that they got somebody, and the dog randomly sits, and yet no drugs are found. Other times the drugs are accurate. Do I think a dog can be trained to sniff out drugs? You bet I do. And I think that they're a great tool in the arsenal for police officers to use appropriately. However, is there misuse and abuse of that tool? You bet.
I never called Spike, canine we've been talking about, to a scene to do an open air sniff and did not get a positive hit on a vehicle.
Amazing. A dog that loved to bite people and found drugs everywhere he went.
He was
super dog. Yeah.
I never didn't get a positive hit. I never didn't get it. But what I will say is I didn't always find dope. So, it's interesting how that works out. But All right, so we beat the canines up enough, and of course you're Montgomery County's best friend. I'm sure. Um, but thinking back over your career, is there a case, not because you lost, or is there a case that keeps you up at night, or a case that's always, kind of comes back around your mind when you're thinking about things because it, opened your eyes to how unjust our justice system can be at times, or how broken our system can be?
There's we'll stick with the theme of police cases. One that I can think about in particular, there's certain immunities that are granted to police departments in statute. There was a woman in a crosswalk in a wheelchair, motorized wheelchair, crossing the street. An officer was headed down the street. He was looking left. There was a call on the radio of a vehicle accident, no injuries, and he would have been third or fourth vehicle on the scene. And he was looking left when he should have been looking ahead and just hit this poor old lady head on. Did a lot of damage, really hurt her. She was fortunate to be able to live through the injuries. But because the law said that this officer was on a call for service, that immunity applied and that there was no liability for it. There was no insurance coverage. And this poor lady just suffered immensely. And that's one of those instances where you just see a great injustice with a harm that was caused through clear negligence from the officer driving the vehicle, yet there was no liability associated with it. Why? Because somebody in our state legislature decided to act a law that would prevent you from suing a police officer under a circumstance when they were on a call for service.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. That's a case to bring up because I had a similar case myself, where I was on duty, and now I don't think I did anything wrong, okay, and I think that I should have been immune from being sued. But then I look back, as I became older, and I looked at these, and I'm like, man, but the family didn't get anything, and it was real simple. Again, it was down Springboro. I run a plate, and if people know anything about the mobile CAD systems and everything that's in there, they can hit on partial VINs, they can hit on partial identifiers for people. And when you're a police officer and you're driving down the road, especially if you're in like rush hour traffic, you get a hit, you might not be able to like look and match up a VIN really quick, right? Like your computer starts beeping, starts sirening, stolen vehicle, wanted person, whatever it was. And I remember I ran a plate past me, and it popped up stolen vehicle, right? Like computer's going crazy. I'm in rush hour. I flip around, I get around a car to get through the lights on, and I catch up to this vehicle. And I won't say the road, but you probably know where it's at. You have to go down a big dip, and then you come right back up another dip as you're leaving Springboro into another area. And lights and sirens, see the car up. Doesn't seem like it's stopping for me. And I go around one car. It's a 2-lane road. And as I get around this car with a 2-lane road, I could see in my mirror all the cars were stopped behind me because they had all pulled over, went to the right, did what they were supposed to do.
Yep.
But as soon as I get back in my lane, I see a work van, has ladder racks and everything on it, passing me full speed. I can tell it doesn't see the cars that are stopped up in front of it. Guy's on a cell phone. And in my rearview mirror, I watched this van lock up his brakes, go to the left, hit a car head on that was stopped. But in his van, it was a plumber, and he had, copper and plumbing things, went through the windshield, end up hitting one of the passengers in the car. And there's a lot of really bad damage that happened to that person, end up being a firefighter's family member. So I'm on scene now there. And of course, everybody blamed me for the incident, which I think back now and I'm like, man, if I wouldn't have ran the plate, if I wouldn't have done something like whatever, but it happened because a guy was distracted on his phone, not seeing lights and sirens. But there was no way that they could have sued me at that time because I was immune, because I was running emergency, operating lights and sirens.
Sure. But that can lead into let's even have a talk about what I see as a personal injury attorney, insurance coverage. And most people don't realize this, but the reason why I think most people should buy insurance is for underinsured motorist coverage. And I'm not here selling insurance or anything,
Sure.
but most people don't even realize what that is. And it's as if the person who hit you had your insurance. So you can go and purchase a policy, not just for liability purposes, but so that you can protect your own vehicle too, to where in that situation that you were in, had that person purchased uh, the underinsured motorist coverage, that is their source of recovery, even if that van that had the plumbing supplies and things like that speared into the other vehicle, even if they had no coverage. So, we also have to protect ourselves as well, and we have the ability to do that.
Yeah, we say that to my son all the time, kind of similar to that. I mean, he's only 13, but man, he's into dirt bikes and crazy stuff. And boys are nuts, man. He's already talking like, I want to, as soon as I get my license, I want a motorcycle. And of course, his mom is an ICU nurse for many, many years. She's like, you're not getting a motorcycle. And she's like, well, you can trust me. Like I'm a good rider, blah, blah. And we always tell him the same thing. We're not worried about you. We're worried about everybody else on the road. Right. And that's a problem with a lot of things. And same thing with insurance. And I agree with you, even if it's life insurance or anything else, like you have to protect yourself, protect everybody around you, even if maybe you never use it, you know?
Yeah, and no, I'll side with your wife on that one. I mean, I've done enough motorcycle accidents. The cars, whatever it is visually, they just don't pick them up all the time. A lot of pull out in front of a motorcycle. There's no protection, no cage like in a vehicle, and these people just suffer catastrophic injuries. I love to ride motorcycles myself. I do it off road, but on a street, you're not going to catch me on a street bike.
Yeah. So we've hit on some crazy cases. We've hit on, of course, your viral case, but some people watching this, they might say, I think of you kind of as like the quiet assassin. I've never said this to you, okay? But when you go through Dayton or around, you see these billboards of attorneys, right? Or you like, they got the same number and they're standing out there in boxing gloves, or maybe I won't name some of the other ones that got some crazy little advertisements. And that's who people like cinemize with, the personal injury attorneys and things like that in Dayton. But what I know is there's some attorneys that don't even have to advertise because they have their reputation, they have referrals, and a lot like me in real estate, honestly. And those are the guys and gals are like quiet assassins, right? It's like you need to know these people if you get into whatever. And for you, I haven't seen I've never seen you have to like buy a billboard and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Why do you think that is?
And I just don't advertise like that with traditional advertising, no TV, no billboards, things like that. And I think it's the reputation that you build for yourself over a long period of time. I mean, the people that know or ask their friends or that have good experiences, those are your best referrals, word of mouth, and just your reputation around town sometimes. That's what carries more weight, I think, with anything else. And I'm very fortunate in that regard to where I haven't had to engage in huge advertising campaigns to try and drum up clients or things like that. And I have good friends, good clients, and clients that have become good friends over the years that provide referrals to me and tell people what kind of job I can do for them.
Yeah. So, staying on that same theme, I guess the question for some people that might be out there watching is like, man, this guy's like beat up in Montgomery County, beat up in Springboro, won lots of big cases. And there's lots of other cases that you have done, like with Bear and some big, huge cases. You've done quite a few malpractice cases where you've won some big settlements for your clients. And people are like, well, who is this guy? Right? Like, that's the question. Who is Doug Brannon? Like, what's your journey and how did you get here?
I'm probably one of those people. My father was an attorney, and growing up, seeing how hard and long my dad worked at his practice, I always said, never want to be an attorney. Don't want to do that. I'll be anything but. Graduated from the University of Dayton locally with a finance degree. And when I graduated, I was looking out there at different jobs to do, what those prospects look like. And I thought, you know what? This doesn't look as good as what dad does. So I'm thinking, I'm going to go to law school. Took the LSAT, went to law school, and it turned out it was a great fit for me. Whatever it is about my personality, how I was raised, and it's something I enjoy. It's very competitive. I do a lot of litigation work, trial work. These are one-on-one battles that take place in a courtroom that are decided win or lose in front of a jury. And that'll get you going in the morning because you are there to do battle for your client that day and you want to win.
Now, do you enjoy litigation part?
It is a lot of fun to get up in front of a jury and argue a case and try and convince them why they need to try and help your client, either by awarding money or finding them not guilty in a criminal matter. And it's very rewarding when you go through a jury trial with a client. I think that you form a special bond with that person, and that's how I've developed many good friends over the years. And it's a very stressful time for them. I think that they appreciate and see all that you do to try and help them not only survive that situation, but make them successful coming out of that situation. But you get a special bond where you go to battle with your client in front of a jury.
All right. So one of the things you just left out of that, man, you're also a pilot. You got your pilot's license, right?
I do. I've been flying now for probably 24 years and haven't crashed yet. So I'm still doing okay with it.
Don't say that. Don't say it. Now, what intrigued you about getting your pilot's license, man?
You
Like,
know,
were you like, man, the courts don't move fast enough, or did you have an aspiration to being like a national attorney? You know, like representing O.J. Simpson or something?
it's always something I've wanted to do and have enjoyed doing it. It's really challenging, and just being up in the air like that and getting that view of the world, the world becomes a much smaller place. And sure, I've used it for work. I've also used it for pleasure, but it is just a wonderful thing to do. I'd encourage anybody to do it and go down to your local fixed base operator, local airport. You will find some great people there, and they are all willing to teach you and help you in your journey to become a pilot. Buy a plane, fly it yourself, fly your family. I've done a lot of great things in that airplane, with made a lot of good memories. So it's a fun toy to have, we'll say.
Well, I couldn't disagree with you on that because you and I have talked. I have all my hours in. I've done really well, but I just haven't got my license. It happened in a funky part of my life where my kids just started getting super active in sports, and it does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of money, which that's kind of whatever. But finding the time to really test. What discouraged me about pilot's license was when I took the ground test and it came back. I got like a 40-some% on the ground test because I couldn't comprehend the weather. Like I'm not good at math, which is crazy because being in real estate and being a business guy, an entrepreneur with multiple businesses,
You crunch a lot of numbers.
you think I'd be good
Yeah.
at math, but I just couldn't do it, man. Now I did end up passing my ground test. I got like a 90 something on it, and I just haven't went to take my FAA test yet. So, but I
Well,
understand the enjoyment you get when you're up there and you're looking down and everything seems so small, especially at nighttime when you're going in, from like a country into an inner city and like all the lights just like kind of light up on you.
and I've flown out to New York before, had the skyline off in the distance, landed at airports there. I've flown into Fort Lauderdale down in Florida, a lot of big airports and a lot of super small airports where there's not even another plane on the ground at the time. And it's just a really cool experience. And once you get your check ride, you give me a call. We're going up in my plane.
Well, I appreciate that and I will. The craziest story I have from flying already is one of my first solos. It was my cross country, and I chose to go up to Put in Bay, which if people don't know that, it's a little island off, Ohio, and it's a very tricky airport to land in because you got to kind of swoop in around the big, light tower
Light
and all that
tower.
stuff. There's always geese and duck like on the runway, blah
It's
blah
a, it's
blah.
a shorter runway. There's trees high on both sides. I
Yeah.
mean, you sort of have to be on your game up there.
Yeah, you go from land to on top of water to back on top of land, right? So you have different, whatever. It's tough, but I did it fine. So I stopped in Toledo, then I went to Put in Bay. I landed great. I was proud of myself. I was a nervous wreck. I was by myself, like I said, cross country solo. And I kind of hung out a minute because like my nerves got the best of me going over the water, and I was super like nervous because I never went over the water. So I don't know why I chose to do that on my first cross country, other than I like to challenge myself.
Yeah.
So I took off a little bit later than what I wanted to. And I get back in the plane and I get up in the air and my GPS won't work, my iPad won't work, my phone won't work. Like I literally have no electronics whatsoever, right? I'm in a little Cessna and of course I had done all the paperwork, right? Like I had done everything by hand and done all my dead reckoning and whatever, but it's nighttime. It's nighttime. So I'm like, all right, well, this is easy because 75 runs all the way up.
Yeah. I IFR flying. I follow roads.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So I found 75. I was able to make it back to Dayton, but I flew slower. So I got back and it was like completely dark. And I hadn't read the NOTAMs and didn't realize that when I was landing at Moraine Air Park, they'd put one in earlier that the landing light, runway lights were not working.
Yeah.
So I'm coming back and I'm clicking my mic, trying to light up the runway. Pitch black, man.
No lights coming on.
Nothing working. And of course, it's surrounded by a river, right?
Yeah.
And there's fog at night coming off that river.
And Moraine's a little bit tricky to get in. They have that levee off the river
Yeah.
to where, it's up probably 15 feet off the runway. And you got to glide over that levee before you touch down. And if you misjudge that, you're in a lot of trouble there.
It's a very, very tiny runway to begin with anyway. But yeah, super tricky. So pitch black, fog coming over, river's right there, coming in. I don't know how I landed that night, but it worked out. And I was hooked after that. I'm like, all right, this was
here's what you
challenging.
learn. I've done that before where I've been at an airport, can't get the lights to come on at night, divert to a different airport where the lights come on.
I probably
That's better
should
than
have.
landing in the dark.
But it's stressful, man. It's like the first cross country, and I'm like, what? I'm trying to call my instructor, like, hey, man, like, help me through this. But of course, he's not answering. So no big deal. But I'm ready to finish that off, man, and we'll get out there. But for you, when you get through law school and you do all that, Why did you choose criminal defense and civil cases?
That's just what was interesting to me. I early on in my years, I did a lot of larger variety of cases, did some real estate work, did some contract work, things of that nature. But, I was just always drawn to the battle in litigation, the battle in court. I've got a brother, he's a in-house attorney for Caterpillar. He's your business transactional type guy. I've got another brother that's an attorney. He's the Montgomery County probate judge. He liked probate and estate type work. And I just fell into the personal injury criminal defense. We all did something different, but it's latch on, do what you like is what they say. And that battle with litigation being in court, that's what I always enjoyed. So that naturally lended itself to the personal injury and criminal defense. And you help people. I mean, these are people that nobody comes to you having their best day when they have to call an attorney.
Right.
I mean, they are calling you when something has drastically gone astray in their life and they need some help. And it's a real honor to have somebody call you up and have them help you with one of their most sensitive, important things that they are dealing with in their life.
Yeah, I guess what I've never understood, there is a huge, well, first of all, let me ask you this. Um, all attorneys are not created equal. You agree with that statement?
I think that speaks true for any profession.
So when somebody is looking for the right attorney, and man, I see so many people make this mistake. But what do you think the biggest mistake is when people are searching for an attorney to help them with a specific situation?
It's probably one of two things. One is they fall into the advertising trap. These people that put out a bunch of advertising and it doesn't necessarily speak to the quality of the work that they do, but it sure lets you know that they're an attorney doing this type of law.
Yeah.
And they may be really great advertisers. That doesn't always translate to really good attorneys or really good skills in the courtroom. And then the other misnomer is if you see an attorney that goes, "Oh, I know the judge really well. I'll get this taken care of." That's usually a red flag.
Yeah.
The judges that I've encountered are all upstanding people. They follow the law and they do what they think is right in a particular case. What you want is an attorney that's respected by the judge that will listen to his arguments and what he has to say. But if you think that you're going to just hire an attorney that's going to schmooze something because he golfs with the judge or something like that, you're picking the wrong guy.
So you don't think you can just buy your way out of cases anymore, is what you're saying?
I don't I don't not entirely sure you could ever buy your way out of a case. What you can buy is good legal representation.
Yeah.
That's your best chance.
Yeah. Well, there's, there is cases out there with corruption. I just listened to a podcast about a judge and a sheriff that were corrupt in a small little border town, right? So it does happen.
And
But
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying that is the exception. We're very fortunate in our American justice system to where that level of corruption rarely exists. And where it does exist, it needs to be rooted out because that will just sink our country as a whole if we can't rely on a judicial system to solve disputes.
yeah, there's a lot of people that follow me. We talk a lot about entrepreneurship and real estate and all that. And I think when I talk to a lot of people that are like specific, like an attorney, a rapper, a comedian, oftentimes they don't necessarily think about themselves as an entrepreneur. And I know you have other entrepreneur ventures, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But just as an attorney, before you kind of ventured out with different revenue streams, did you always view yourself as an entrepreneur, or were you like, I'm just an attorney?
I think I always enjoyed investing, um, the entrepreneurship route, things like that, working for yourself, being in control of your own destiny, your own outcome. That's one of the things that led me into finance was I wanted to learn about money, how to invest, things of that nature. And, that's always sort of stuck with me and been a part of me. I haven't necessarily been ever a person that said, "Oh, I just want to go work and pick up my paycheck at the end of Friday and be simple like that." I have found ways to complicate my life in ways that keep it interesting, that generate other revenue streams, that keep me intrigued with what I'm doing.
So what do you think the biggest challenge is, right? Like there's probably some new attorneys that might be sitting here, listening to you or somebody that's thinking about going into law school and going to be an attorney. From a business standpoint only, what do you think the biggest challenge is if somebody decides to take that role and be an attorney? Like where are the obstacles that somebody's going to have to really watch out for when they first start out in the business?
I can tell you that the legal environment, it's a very competitive environment, meaning law schools pump out new kids every year. you're not going to be the only one entering into the marketplace, and that it will be competitive. You have to prove yourself over time that you have the skill set for your clients' needs and that you have clients with those needs if that's the area of law that you want to practice in. It's not something where somebody should go to law school and just say, oh, just because I have a law degree, I should be making $500,000 a year. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work like that. There's a lot of attorneys that, work very hard and don't necessarily earn a big salary. I would say the vast majority of attorneys, especially in the Dayton area, don't make huge money, but a lot of them love what they do.
You know what I would, if I was summing up an attorney, I would say that on average, an attorney is the equivalent of a very much more educated realtor with a lot of principles, right? Because I mean, we have close to 4,000 realtors in the Dayton, Ohio area. There's a very small percentage that make good money, right? And your revenue stream is unreliable. You have to consistently pump out a pipeline. And then there's guys like you. And there's, some badass realtors that are out there that have created a really good business. But I was surprised several years back. I was running a company for a guy, and you would know him, and he was thinking about bringing an in-house attorney in. And I said, "Man, how are you gonna bring an in-house attorney in? Like, it has to be expensive." And when he came back and talked to me after he talked to this attorney that he was going to bring in, and he told me what the guy wanted, the salary wise, which was well less than six figures, I said, I didn't realize that. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know there's attorneys out there working for 50, 60, 70, $80,000 that are out there. I just thought, we believe the movies, man. Like, you drive around fancy cars, you got, $5,000 suits. That's not every attorney.
No, and a lot of it is risk reward, just like real estate investing. As an attorney with a personal injury case, we are required to advance fees and costs of the case, meaning we hire experts, we pay for the depositions, we pay the filing fees, things like that to get a medical malpractice case to trial, for example. It's not uncommon at all to advance $100,000 worth of costs. And if you lose that case, you lose that money. But if you win that case, the payoff can be pretty substantial sometimes. Those are big cases with big damages, but you have to be willing to take the risk and use your own money and put it out there. And that's how sometimes you can make a bigger paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many similarities with lots of businesses between what you just described, and no different than if I flip a house or I buy an apartment complex or you buy real estate because you're into multifamily, you have a commercial space, you got farm stuff. It's the same thing. Like, you have to risk it, and the ones that aren't willing to risk it are not going to make the big dollars, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. But you mentioned medical malpractice. That's probably, I would only imagine. I'm not an attorney, but I can only imagine. One, I know it's one of the most hardest cases to to bring because of the challenges for it that you can describe to us if you want. But like you said, there's a lot of money that you have to put out front, right? So I imagine that's probably nerve wracking when you're like, oh man, I know I'm gonna have to drop, because the people that come to you that have a case, they're not the people that are going to give you $100,000 retainer. They're not the dope boy on the corner that's a kingpin, or not on the corner, but like the kingpin that goes to his drug attorney and says, "Here, man, here's 100,000, like, get me out of it." Most of these people don't have the money to actually hire attorneys, so you're going to be taking pro bono, not necessarily pro
Well,
bono, but you're going to be taking it
it's on,
without a
it's
fee
on a
or thing.
contingency
Yeah,
fee.
contingency.
And, people just, and we don't expect them to have the money to, not everybody can afford to pay an attorney $500 an hour and advance all the fees and costs associated with the case. And that's why we do it on a contingency fee, because otherwise their case would never make it to court unless that financing was in place that the attorney provides to do that.
All right, man. Let's talk real estate, Doug. You're not just an attorney. You're a pilot. You're lots of things, but you're also a real estate investor. And you have some multifamily. You have some commercial office space. I mean, you have a pheasant hunting farm. I mean, you got other farmland. Talk to me about your experiences in real estate, man. How'd you get into real estate, right?
Well, it's real estate has always been an interest of mine, just like flying almost. But it's something that I got into early, was involved in when I was in undergraduate school, working for developer, developing plats, building houses. Some of my first jobs were in construction. So I've sort of always had an interest there. And then, that developed into, how to diversify a revenue stream. Like you said, like being a realtor, like being an attorney, you don't always know when that next case is going to settle, when that paycheck is going to come. The real estate provides a more secure revenue stream. And when those opportunities have come up for me to invest in real estate, I've taken advantage of some of those and have purchased some properties. And I have found that that cash flow can offset some of the risk associated with the law practice as well. But it certainly is a good revenue stream, and I think can be a good way to invest some of your money where you have control and can manage those properties.
So you're probably familiar with some of the recent lawsuits that have been out there with NAR and everything else. Like, what's your opinion on that, and how do you think that affects the real estate market as a whole? Not just realtors, but buyers and sellers together.
I think that that is really interesting. That case that really allowed everybody to renegotiate what they are willing to pay realtors. What's interesting about it so far is I don't think, at least in the numbers that I'm seeing come back, that there has been a huge, substantial difference in how realtors are being compensated, which I'm sure the realtors are glad about.
Yeah.
However, where I see different dynamics with being able to list a house for sale by owner on Zillow, things like that. One thing that I just recently did is I purchased a house, did a complete remodel, call it a flip, if you will. But I went ahead just for my own curiosity. I posted it for sale by owner on Zillow just to see what that would look like. And I just did that within the last couple of weeks. But some of the conversations I'm having with the realtors when they call are really interesting because this is what we're talking about. And I don't necessarily, on the listing, I didn't put my last name in there. So they weren't able to figure out who I was. But as I'm asking them these questions, do you have a buyer agreement for what percentage? Is your buyer willing to pay you that? And they are having some difficulty answering these
Yeah.
questions.
I'm sure that they are shocked when they get on the phone with you, because here's what you realize very quickly. Now, in which you have to understand, and you know this, but we have a brokerage. Yes, I'm a realtor. That's like my 27th job,
Yeah.
right? Like, I make six figures with it, but that's just not, if you ask me what I do, I'm never going to say I'm a realtor. Now, it'll get into conversation, but I have so much fun with realtors, man. Like, I'm a lot like you in a different perspective. Like, it's not litigation, but I love negotiation, right? My favorite thing to do is, when I was working for a large retail company, was interrogation. They'd fly me around the country, and that's all I'd do is go and interrogate people. Like, I love it. I love that interaction with somebody. I love seeing if we can win the conversation. I've studied interrogation. I've studied negotiations for a long time. And what you realize when you're dealing with realtors is how many just don't have a clue, man. And they really don't know what's going on. And I've had the most fun with this NAR settlement that I've ever had in real estate. Same type of conversation you just described. And I can only imagine when they call you, they don't know they're calling an attorney. Right?
Well, and some of it is some people just don't know how to get to a closing table, get the title company involved, whatever it is, let alone if you throw in a 1031 exchange, let alone special financing
Yeah.
arrangements that come into play in deals, and you've done probably all sorts of those, but it's most realtors haven't. Most of them don't have the experience to do that. They are almost part-time realtors that may sell half a dozen homes a year or something like that. And that's,
Yeah.
it's always an interesting conversation, but seeing how that's shaking out and dealing with that now is, for me, it's sort of interesting when I'm having those conversations.
Yeah. There's so many similarities though between different professions, but with the realtor side, it's the same thing. I feel bad sometimes talking to realtors because, like, I don't even focus on it, right? Like, I have agents that work for me that do a great job. Like, I don't even really list anymore unless it's like a client's like, Todd, I want you to list it for me and handle everything personally. I will. But the other agents, I let them take the listings, right? So they can make commission and whatever. I've never advertised, never done, everything's referral, word of mouth, like just the way we've built our business up, becoming an expert in the industry, a lot like you with the attorney field. So I feel bad talking to a realtor, be like, yeah, I mean, maybe I make 300K a year as a realtor that I'd ever advertised for. And to see so many of them struggle, that are struggling to just make a couple deals a year, it's really incredible to me. But when you start talking to a lot of them, you realize a lot of it is their fault. They don't take the time to self educate themselves. Like, the stupidest question I get after the settlement is this, and I'm going to say stupid, and maybe people will beat me up that are realtors. The first question they always ask is, how much is your seller willing to pay for the buy side commission? I think that's the dumbest question. And I actually have like responses already programmed in my phone in my notes, and I just copy and paste them to all the realtors. Because my follow up question is, how much is your buyer willing to pay you for your commission because you signed a buyer broker agreement,
Yeah.
right? Like, you already know how much you're going to make. Well, there's no argument, because what are they going to say? Well, my client really can't pay that. Well, because now you're saying, okay, you just fraudulently did a document knowing your client can't pay this, but you had him sign it because that's the law. and they really have no follow-up. So once you call them out like one or two times on some silly little questions, like they completely back down.
Yeah.
But I have seen agents that don't want to show homes or they don't want to do anything if you won't tell them exactly what the commission is. But my response is always simple. It depends on your offer. Bring a strong offer, and I'm sure that my seller will be more than
We
happy to
will
play.
talk and negotiate it out. And
Bring a lowball bullshit offer, you might not get paid.
And that and that's it. It's, it's people are almost always willing to negotiate at some price. And if it's like you said, the money's there and it's worth talking about, usually there's enough there to where everybody makes some money and can go home and be happy with the deal.
Yeah.
But
I follow a lot of social media sites for realtors, and the most common topic that comes up on is a realtor jumping on and putting something in the forum that says, I'm sick of these, listing agents taking 3.5% and me getting 2.5% on the buy side. Like something needs to change. If you read that and you didn't respond, but you're thinking in your head, like, what would your response be to seeing a realtor put that? Upset that they got 2.5 and the list side got 3.5.
well, you better go out and figure out how to get the listing then. In that case, if that's the equation and you're on side with what the other guy's getting, well, you better go figure out how to beat the other guy to get the listing.
That's it. Either be the listing or figure out how to be a better negotiator. I mean, it seems pretty simple to me. One of the things I find interesting about your investment career with real estate that we don't talk about a lot on the show, and I don't really do any of it. Like I land flip, and mine's a little bit different. I'll get together an entire subdivision and get all the zoning done, and then I'll package it up real nice, kick it to developer. But you actually do some different stuff with land. I mean, you're managing and you own, I think, over 1,000 acres?
Yeah, of farmland, and it's sort of a mixed use, tillable acreage, some recreational property. And I found that the investing in land over a long period of time, just the appreciation off that land has become a great investment. Land doesn't always cash flow, which can make it difficult to invest in, just because cash rents that you get off the property don't always allow you to make a mortgage payment if you plan on financing it.
Sure.
But there's other ways to get creative to get revenue streams off a property. One of the farms that I have, I turned into a pheasant farm, a pheasant hunting farm. And, people pay to come out. We release birds, people hunt. You were there.
I was enjoying myself
many years ago, and helped me get that off the ground way back when. And I appreciate that. But that is just one way to diversify a revenue stream. Another thing that people overlook is, timber value, forestry, things of that nature. That can be a whole different way to evaluate the value of a property. Take some specialized knowledge or you call in a forester to help you evaluate a property. And even long-term, you start to look at the sustainability of harvesting timber off that property. All the oak market, for example, when the whiskey market sort of went down, they quit buying the oak. You follow all these sorts of things. And then another way is there's a lot of flipping in farmland right now with deer hunters, where you can take a property just like you would a residential investment and you do certain improvements on that property, except for in the case of a deer hunting property, you put in food plots, you put in good access, you put in stand sites, you plant fruit trees. These are all things that you can do to increase the value of the property and flip it and sell it for a profit. So, all of those are different revenue streams that your untraditional real estate investor may not be considering, but I'm going to put it out there. It's things that I've done and I've enjoyed, but then again, I enjoy hunting and fishing a lot. That's one of my hobbies. So it's something I've delved into and learned a lot about farm management and how to operate a farm, both for hunting and agricultural purposes.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you didn't mention, or I didn't hear you mention it, that I find super interesting with farm property. I don't know why I haven't bought it. Why I haven't bought more. Like I have some acreage, but I haven't went all in. Like I love land flipping, right? And the one thing we know about this, they're not making any more of it. You can't unless an ocean all of a sudden dries up and we got a bunch of land, like there is no more of it, right? So the value of buying land at a good price and holding it over time is just incredible. But one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about it is when you start getting into agricultural and farmland, the tax advantages that you can reap from some of that are pretty amazing also, right?
Yeah. I mean, the CAU value, they do a rollback on the taxes for agricultural land just because, it just doesn't cash flow like a multifamily property would, to where if they were paying taxes at the full rate, family farms would be falling off. the map, people would have to sell them. They just couldn't afford to keep them if they were valued at what the property is valued at. So that's a real benefit to owning farmland, is just the lower tax bases and holding costs of that property. But at the same time, you still get over a long period of time an appreciation rate. And I think if you buy land right, meaning you don't overpay, you hold it for a long period of time, it's hard to lose money in farmland. It may just be
Sure.
a matter of how much you're going to make.
So if you're looking right now and somebody's trying to evaluate, like let's just talk about our area, Southwest Ohio. Somebody's evaluating some farmland, and we're just spouting off a number. The first one that comes to your gut, and they're looking at a by acre dollar amount. Um, let's say it's not in a suburb; it's in an unincorporated area, because obviously, if we have utilities at the property and all that, that changes the value, right? But what would be a number per acre that you're like, man, that's probably a pretty good deal. I need to dig into that a little bit further.
When you get into southern rural Ohio, you may be able to get in there 2,500, 3,000 on the absolute low end. But when you're talking high quality tillable soil, you go up to north of Dayton, get up into Miami County, Troy area, something like that. That's 15, 20,000 an acre. And that soil quality can sometimes be a huge difference. And what that property is used for is a huge difference. A lot of local knowledge, I think, in farmland is necessary, and knowledge regarding its best use, meaning, is this going to be planted in corn and soybeans, or is this a hunting property, a recreational property, or does it have timber value? All of that can greatly influence what a property is actually worth.
Have you thought about doing any developments at any of your property?
It's the next iteration for me, probably at the pheasant farm, is I need to build a bigger clubhouse and event facility there to where we can hold, probably off-season weddings and events like that during the summer, and then fall and winter, it gets turned into more of a club for hunting events and things of that nature. So that's probably the next iteration of my farm chapter.
Well, it sounds like Montgomery County might help you fund some of those things that you need to do over the next several years if they don't straighten up, right?
Well, I always appreciate him contributing to my business ventures as I look to invest in other things.
Yeah. All right. So let's be honest. The Cincinnati case, I mean, it looks like something out of reality TV. You have viral clips, tons of drama. There's strings being pulled from the politicians and things like that. So, as an attorney, when you're handling those cases, like, how do you balance the court of law and the court of public opinion?
I think it's best not to. What your focus should be on is representing your clients. What is going to be best for your clients, as long as you're acting in their best interest, however that may play out in the public, the media, things of that nature, that's less of my concern, as making sure that my clients get a good result out of that. And for Alex right now, it's going to be finding him not guilty of this bogus disorderly conduct charge.
Well, man, I hope so. And in that case actually hit home because some of the victims are from the Dayton, Ohio area.
Yeah.
And I was amazed when it all started going crazy and the amount of people that I knew that were friends with them. You first see a viral clip, you're like, man, that sucks. But then within the next couple of days, you're like, man, my buddies was hanging out with them a couple weekends ago, or like this. Like, it's such a small place, even though we have, almost 400,000 people in the Dayton area and tons of people in Cincinnati. It's like, everything seems connected at times, but hopefully that goes well for you guys. And it doesn't turn into more of a Netflix special, because right now that seems like what it's gearing up to be.
Well, it's early in that show. There's a lot more still to come in the Cincinnati drama, but I'm telling you, after this video comes out, it's going to be a game changer down there. And I think you're going to see some really upset people and some politicians backpedaling even farther than they've already gone back.
Yeah, I can imagine. You ready for some rapid fire questions, man?
Let's do it.
Just a couple of them. They're simple. Media drama versus legal truth. What wins most?
In a courtroom, the legal truth, because those jurors are usually pretty good at picking up what is true, what's evidence, and making that decision based upon that. And that's why there's always these big surprises sometimes when you hear these verdicts come out, where people go, or it's portrayed in the media one way, and people are, oh, how did they ever come up with that result? Why? Because they sat there and they listened to the evidence. Sometimes it takes a week, 2 weeks for the jury to hear all the evidence, or these little news blurbs are 30 seconds. So once they get the full story, you usually get the right result.
All right, so we've seen movies like Runaway Jury and things like that. Do you believe that most often juries get it right from a technical standpoint, and that they take their job seriously more often than not, and get the decisions right.
I think that they do more often than not. Sometimes a case will turn on the smallest of facts or tidbits that you would think were inconsequential that a juror may pick up on, that causes an errant result. Anybody that tries cases and doesn't tell you otherwise is lying. And that is, you probably, if you've tried enough cases, won some that you should have lost and maybe lost one that you should have won. Why? Because you can never control the outcome of 8 people that weren't smart enough to get out of jury duty.
Yeah, man, juries are so interesting.
But really, when they get selected for jury duty, I have always seen them take it seriously, try and listen to the evidence, and try and do the right thing based upon the law that the judge gives them, the evidence that they hear. And I've never seen jurors shrug off or act like they didn't care. I think they truly take that responsibility and that civic duty seriously.
You ever had a prosecutor whisper in your ear or talk a little crap to you and tell you there's no chance you're going to win a case, and then you blew them away?
You know, there is always a little trash talk between attorneys sometimes, but everybody knows that, you know, the attorneys that you deal with, you'll deal with them again, case after case sometimes, and you respect them for going to battle with you. And yes, there can be a few jabs here and there, but everybody knows that they don't always have control over all the facts and all the evidence that comes out. Some cases you begin where you think that you have everything on your side and you don't. And the prosecutor sometimes realizes that the case that he once thought he had doesn't really exist. And, you know that that isn't always within his control, and that you respect the person in battle as well.
Biggest myth about criminal defense attorneys that drives you nuts?
That they can just get things thrown out of court instantly without doing any real work or research or writing or going through motions or things like that. It's this, I know the judge mentality, therefore all problems will be solved, doesn't exist.
Yeah. All right, so Doug, from Cincinnati's viral brawl that's happening right now, pepper spray cover-ups inside the jail, crazy canines, and all of the other stuff, along with the huge verdicts that you've won for your clients, civil rights cases and all that good stuff. Let's a last word from you. What do you want people to know about the justice system that they would never guess from watching the news or listening to the media or other people that's out there?
You know, with all the things that you hear that may be wrong with our justice system, it is still probably the gold standard in the world due to the lack of a corrupt process, meaning it isn't a perfect system, but usually given enough time and with enough effort from a legal standpoint, the right result generally will get reached. And that's what I think people should really know, and that they should work hard, and that there are people working hard, attorneys and judges, that want to see the right results. Nobody wants to live in a society or in a community where there is a corrupt system.
Yeah, that's great, man. If there's people out there right now that are looking for Dayton's best criminal defense attorney, Dayton's top civil attorney, if they're searching for somebody that will treat them right, take their case on, and always be truthful and really go to bat for them and fight for them, how would people get in contact with you?
You know, it's they can call the office number. If I can plug myself, 937-228-2306. Happy to talk to them about whatever legal issue they may have. If I can't help them, I can certainly put them in the right direction. They can go to our website, brandlaw.com, and there's a contact information through our website where they can get a hold of us as well.
All right. Well, man, that's a wrap. Doug, I appreciate you coming in. Man, I admire your career. I admire the different revenue streams that you have. You're not just an attorney. You're not just a badass, criminal defense and civil attorney. You got to kick it on all cylinders of life, man, and you're doing it right. And you're an example of what people should be looking at when they decide they want to, not just go into a career, but also create generational wealth for their family. So I appreciate you coming in, man.
Well, thanks for having me on today, Todd. It's always fun to sit down with you and talk, and it's always an interesting conversation with you. And you've done a lot to build up your career, and seeing, I've known you for a long time, and seeing what you built up to, it's just great to see the success that you're having with what you're doing.
All right, man. Appreciate that. All right, guys. Till next time, it's a wrap, man. We'll see you.
Holla. out the kid. I'm about to prove them all wrong again. I got a low tolerance, cause they don't even know what the problem is. It's me. You waiting on the boy to fail, then hold your breath.